Welcome to the Adult Basic Skills Professional Development video series. Throughout our productions, we are committed to excellence in adult education and professional development in basic skills instruction. The goal of this video series is to improve the effectiveness and quality of instruction through focused professional development.
Adult basic skills students must learn to read and write well and do higher order thinking. It's not enough for them to learn facts. They must be taught to think for themselves. The Goals of America 2000 and the SCANS report cite the need for literate workers who can compete in a global economy. The modern workplace requires employees who can communicate, work in teams, make decisions about task assignments, set quotas, manage time, and meet high-quality work standards. Adults must be able to do critical and creative thinking and problem solving. Good questions improve student classroom participation and make students active learners. Our adult classrooms must be places where students' minds are engaged and active. When minds are active, students label, sort, translate, compare, generalize, infer, hypothesize, create, and judge information. Active learning is learning with an emphasis on what goes on in minds. As an instructor questions, adult learners think and feel, then actively do, read, write, and talk. How can an instructor teach students to think? One way is through instructor modeling. When an instructor thinks aloud about a question or a problem, students hear how their instructor's thinking processes work. Another way an instructor can teach his students to think is by asking questions which require students to think at higher levels. This videotape lesson examines instructor questioning types and techniques. Since instructor questioning plays such an important place in instruction, let's look at some question types. A literal type question requires a student to make a convergent thinking operation. That is, converge on the right answer. A literal question demands that a student remember explicitly stated information. By using a literal question, an instructor can check a student's memory and understanding. A literal question has one right answer, which can be verified directly from class notes or the printed page as either a right or wrong answer. Literal question examples: who, what, when, where, and how. Describe. Retell in your own words. Teachers have used literal questions and recitation in their instruction from the beginning of schooling in America. The teacher initiates a question that is followed by a student response and terminated with a teacher's evaluation of the response. As children, we all felt dread and fear when a teacher questioned us in front of the class. Recitation and literal questioning result in classroom interaction, which is teacher-led and teacher-controlled. It usually leads to a dead-end interaction between students. Recitation is still all too pervasive in classrooms and across many instructional contexts. Literal type questions account for about 70% of all the questions asked in a typical classroom. An inferential type question requires a student to make an inferential thinking operation. Often, for whatever reason, there are some gaps in information. Inferential thinking demands that a student remember the facts given earlier, analyze information, use prior knowledge about the subject, use logic, and make a prediction or inference. Through inferential thinking, a student may infer a main idea when it is not directly stated, or draw a conclusion that information not directly stated must be true. The answer a student gives will depend on his experiential background, the ability to derive logical inferences, and the willingness to take chances. That is, make predictions. Answers may vary. Inferential question examples. How is an example of, how is related to, classify according to, how does compare or contrast with, what evidence can you present for, Making inferences is not blind guessing. A student must become a detective. Before answering an inferential question, a student must pause for a moment to remember and analyze the facts related to a question. They must base answers on some of the facts given, logic, and what they already know about the subject. The answer is really a hypothesis or a guess since it must be inferred. It takes time to interpret and explain. Answers to an inferential question may be varied since they cannot be verified directly from class notes or the printed page. Inferential questions account for less than 15% of the questions asked in a typical classroom. A creative type question requires a student to make a divergent thinking operation. A creative question demands that a student synthesize and apply information to a new situation or to solve a problem. A student uses his knowledge and experiences to create or invent alternative ideas. A student may even express his ideas in some artistic medium. Answers may vary based on a student's background, values, feelings, attitudes, emotions, and their ability to think creatively and divergently. Creative question examples. What could you predict or infer from? What ideas can you add to? How would you create or design a new? What might happen if you combined with? What solutions would you suggest for? Most adults like to be reflective and creative. A creative question leads an adult to do divergent thinking, thereby to synthesize, create, hypothesize, invent, design, and compose. Survival in the real world and the workplace demands that an adult be a problem solver and a creative thinker. Creative questions have no correct answers and cannot be verified directly from class notes or the printed page. Student discussions and classroom participation arise from creative questions. Too few creative questions are asked in a typical classroom. A critical type question requires a student to make a critical thinking operation. A critical question demands that a student remember, analyze, and judge information. During critical thinking operations, a student evaluates or judges information based on logic, values, objectivity, and knowledge about the subject. Using critical thinking, a student detects biases and makes distinctions between factual and non-factual information. Answers to creative questions will vary based on a student's background and the ability to think critically. Critical question examples. Do you agree? What do you think about? What is the most important? Prioritize according to. How would you decide about? What criteria would you use to assess? An adult is constantly evaluating everything around them. Each adult has his or her own set of criteria. There are things an adult values and feels strongly about. They like to express judgment because personal feelings, attitudes, values, and emotions are involved. They feel complimented when an instructor asks opinions and when judgment counts. An answer to an evaluative question may be very subjective and have many variations which cannot be verified directly from class notes or the printed page. Evaluative questions lead to student discussions and classroom participation. Yet few evaluative questions are asked in most classrooms. One important caution: if an instructor's questions are to be effective, he must give the student 3 to 5 seconds of wait time between questions. Wait time may be thought of as student think time. It is defined as the time between the end of an instructor's question and a student's response. By allowing a student 3 to 5 seconds of wait time, a student has time to do the higher thinking operations and generate a complete answer. In a study of wait time, an instructor who allows a longer wait time obtains greater student speculation, conversation, and argument. Generally, literal questions which can be answered yes or no should be avoided. Yes or no questions give a student little opportunity to think analytically, creatively, or critically, and can be answered by guessing. Questions may be pre-planned before class or arise spontaneously through student interaction. It is always wise for an instructor to outline a series of questions before class begins. The mere fact that this is done beforehand contributes to an instructor's questioning ability. Having thought about questions gives an instructor a sense of security and direction, aiding his ability to conduct a discussion. Involved in any significant communication between people is the ability to ask appropriate questions and to listen. This is communication. When an instructor asks a question, they are providing an adult student an opportunity to use their mind. Clearly, the questions an instructor asks can make a difference between an outdated classroom and an exciting learning environment. Good questioning and listening convey to students respect and admiration. If an instructor asks questions requiring only short answers and rapid responses, this is controlling, even though this may not be the intent. An important goal in improving questioning techniques is to control students less. Let's give adult students more opportunities to use their minds by encouraging them to be creative, critical thinkers, and allowing them to display their individual differences.